Adolescence on Netflix is an excellent example of how masculinity works and how the worship of masculinity hurts girls and boys, men and women. One of the things that stood out to me about the show was that the boy who unalived his female classmate had been getting bullied, and then he started to turn to red pill content online, and that made him kind of develop the mindset that kind of led him towards unaliving his classmate. And one of the moments in the movie was him talking about how he was playing sports and he wasn't very good at it, and his father was ashamed of him. And then later on, the father talks about how he was ashamed of his son because he wasn't good at sports. So it was this moment where, and I've talked about this before, about how with a lot of boys, a lot of men, they outsource their sense of validation to other men. When I talk about masculine energy, I talk about it in terms of being the outer shell of something. It is not the substance itself, it is the thing that represents the substance. And so when men co-opt this energy of being a shell of something, then they become a shell of themselves. And so this boy, who like most males have been given a very limited idea of what it means to be a human being, sees that he's being the wrong kind of man or male human being. He lashes out in destructive ways. And one thing that the show does, and I don't know if they did this on purpose, but I think that this should be emphasized more, is that this young man was good at drawing. Drawing is not a team sport. This is not a us versus them. Drawing is you draw. It's you versus you. It builds the substance up within you. This would have been something that he was good at. So this would have been something that he would have been proud of. His father could have been proud of about him, or they could have pushed him towards that kind of thing. But because masculinity is more about outwardness, it's about being the shell, it's about being on the exterior, it tends to be more combative because it's about testing one exterior against another exterior, comparison and contrast. So drawing is not the most competitive thing. It's not really connected with one's gender. It's an activity that does not give him an opponent. And more boys need to be encouraged to take part in those kinds of activities. So much of the main character's struggles was because he saw himself as a loser. So much of his struggles was because he outsourced his sense of self. He didn't care about what he was, he only cared about how he was perceived. Because if you are only identifying with the part of yourself that is a representation of something, you are not identifying with the part of yourself that is something. The scene with the sandwich, that episode 3, I think that was the best episode, where the young man is having a conversation with a psychologist, a female psychologist, and she brings him a sandwich, a cheese and pickle sandwich, and he does not particularly like that, but he eats it later on. He takes a bite out of it because he could. That sandwich represented women, and him being able to take them or leave them, but just whatever, just discarding them because they're just there. The entire miniseries, he keeps saying he didn't do it. We know he did it. It's on video, but he says he didn't do it. This is because he doesn't see this girl as a person. He sees her as a means to an end. The psychologist has to continually bring up the fact that this girl is now not alive anymore, because even the way that, I think the boy's name was Jamie would talk about her as if she was still alive. There's even a point where Jamie talks about the girl that he unalived having been in a bad place, and he'd hoped that that would make her want to date him. And I have talked about this before, where if you're a woman or a girl and you are in a bad place in life, if your self-esteem is lacking, if you're not well, if something's wrong with you, there's always going to be a male with his in your face. And this is exactly what I meant. Like, they nailed it with this, because he pretty much said it. I forget what his exact words were. Describes her as weak, as she was weak. So I thought I could take advantage of her type deal. This kind of goes back to the sandwich thing, where it's like, it's there, I'm going to take advantage of the situation. Might as well. This boy would have taken her to the fair or unalived her, with either one. There's another thing that he'd said where he talked about, like, there was some situation where he could have taken advantage of her and he didn't. And so he's like, well, you know, other boys would have touched her and I didn't. Doesn't that make me better than them? And again, this goes to show you that whole contrasting and comparing oneself to other boys, other men, never making decisions from a place of substance, only making decisions from a place of external validation. and starting from a very low place, starting from the bar being in hell. Jamie's examples for what it means to be a man are his father and his grandfather, and they are pretty much shells of people as well. The only emotions that they comfortably show are anger, disgruntledness. They complain a lot. So this is his idea of what it means to be a man. A lot of regret, not a lot of substance, a lot of anger, lack of control. Let's talk about he was just in his room. I thought he was safe in his room. On the last episode of the miniseries Adolescence, Jamie's mother and father are sitting in his bedroom and they are talking with each other about where they could have possibly went wrong with Jamie. This is when Jamie's father confesses to having been ashamed of Jamie for not being as athletic as he thought he should have been. And Jamie's mother talks about how much time Jamie spent all by himself in his bedroom on the computer. The irony of Jamie's mother talking about how she thought Jamie was safe alone in his room on the internet is that Jamie was especially not safe. The internet gives him access to the entire world, and the entire world has access to Jamie. And being that Jamie is a boy, he is especially vulnerable to wanting to seek validation from men and other boys. And this is how red pill influencers are able to capitalize on young men, is that they know that they're impressionable, they know that they're vulnerable, and they take advantage of their low self-esteem. They promote misogyny, they promote hatred of women. They tell these boys that being a masculine person is more important than being a human being. And so even though these men like Andrew Tate and Jordan Peterson aren't living in the home with these boys, they are grooming them. They might as well be living in their homes. And once these boys get out into the world, they act out all of the things that they learned in the privacy of their home where they were not safe. In a sense, the home is an incubator for these incels, because these young men are being trained to go out into the world and war against women and young girls. And this is why Jamie is fully prepared to take advantage of Katie when he sees her in what he considers to be a weak state. And then he is ready to unalive her when he sees her as having made a fool of him. Being that his entire identity is a shell, he is nothing but a walking ego, fragile and desperate for approval. Every interaction that he has is one where he is desperate to win. This is evident throughout his session with the psychologist, where he accuses her of trying to trick him, and the entire conversation feels like one big tug of war, to the point where it leaves the psychologist exhausted and crying at the end of their session. Considering the intricacies of the world that Jamie is forced to have to navigate, it's no wonder that he sees everything as some kind of minefield. One of the main characters in this show is a detective named Luke Bascombe, who leads a police raid into the Miller family's home to arrest Jamie. Bascombe has a son who's about the same age as Jamie and who goes to the same school. His son's name is Adam. And Adam is being teased by his classmates. Like, these kids are so bad that they are like teasing him in front of his father when his father comes to the school. And so later on, Detective Bascombe takes his son Adam aside and they have a conversation about what's going on at the school. And Adam breaks down to his father the language that the kids use and the different emojis and what they mean and all of the symbolism. And at this point, Detective Bascombe is just like, oh my God, like, it's a lot. It's a lot of information. And it's clear to him that this is an entire world that he knows nothing about. And so I think it's at the end of the second episode that the detective decides that he wants to spend more time with his son. And thankfully, he comes to that conclusion, because that's one of the main things with this show, is that it's clear that these kids are not being supervised. They are navigating an entirely different world from their parents, and in more ways than one. It's one thing to just be in another generation, but it's another thing to have so much access, again, to the entire world, and the entire world having this much access to you. The last episode of the series has us spending time with the Miller family. This is like 13 months after the murder has been committed. Jamie's father, Eddie, his mother, Manda, and his sister, Lisa, are all at home. It's Eddie's birthday, and there's kind of an underlying sadness when it comes to this family now. But Eddie is still trying to enjoy his birthday. Amanda's trying to make his birthday nice for him. But outside on their truck is a spray painted word. It says nonce, which apparently means PDF file. And so this puts a damper on the entire day because that was Eddie's work van that this was sprayed on. Eddie tries to make the best of it. He decides that they all should just go to the movies, but first they stop by a hardware store in order to try and get the spray paint off of the truck. But that doesn't go so well because one of the workers at the hardware store recognizes Eddie and then has this weird conversation with him about how he's siding with Jamie and he doesn't think that Jamie did what he did to that girl. He goes on to mention that there were some leaked photos of Katie that came out. And this had nothing to do with the fact that Katie had been unalived, but it was enough for this worker to think that it didn't happen. And being that Eddie actually saw the tape, he saw the video of his son committing this horrendous crime, he knows that this young man is wrong. And so this kind of points to the victim blaminess of it all, where if a girl or woman is seen as anything less than perfect, then she deserves whatever happened to her, or she was lying, or it never happened. She's not a human being. It doesn't count. Either way, things don't go as planned, and Eddie and his family end up driving back home. And while on their way home, Jamie calls from the detention center. And Jamie says to his father that he is going to change his plea to guilty. Eddie is upset at this news and just is despondent. And Manda takes over the conversation. And from there, when they get back, that's when they sit in Jamie's room and ponder all of the ways that they went wrong. Throughout the entire series, it's clear that Manda is kind of the backbone. She's able to express her emotions in a healthy way. She's communicative, and so is Lisa. They're not perfect, but they're definitely not as volatile as Eddie and as Jamie. And this goes to show that the idea of masculinity is kind of holding these men back from being communicative, being emotionally intelligent, being able to express themselves in healthy ways to the point where when they are dealing with overwhelming emotions, they either get really, really full of rage or they shut down completely. Nearly all of the male characters, when they're experiencing something emotional, they react the same way. They shut down or they storm off or they fly into a rage. The only character that wasn't a male that did that was the friend of Katie, the girl who was unalived. It's kind of understandable considering this girl has experienced something really traumatizing and that her friend was unalived by another classmate. But I was wondering about the choice of having this one black girl, I think she's like the only black girl in the series, be violent and also shut down and not want to answer any questions and just being so, lashing out and angry. Again, I understand it, but I'm wondering about the choice there. Like, is there a reason why this particular character is black? Lisa, on the other hand, who is Jamie's sister, is a little bit more low-key. She doesn't fly off the handle. She does kind of have the typical teenage thing of being very private, everything's cringe, she's embarrassed by her parents sometimes, but ultimately, like, she's a gentle soul. That's how she comes across. And there's a point in the series where Eddie and Manda kind of look at each other and they're like, how do we have this daughter and our son is like this? And this kind of speaks to the idea as a whole that this lionizing of masculinity, this idea of masculinity that reduces men and boys to nothing but mere shells of themselves, is destroying men. It's destroying boys. And it's hurting girls, but in a different way. Because the girls are imploding while the boys are exploding. So yeah, there was a lot here for sure. But I'm curious as to what you guys got from watching the series, and if there's anything else like that y'all would want me to elaborate on in my assessment of it.